Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Well, how is BC's economy doing? BC's projected record deficit has turned out to be lower, but still sits at more than $7 billion. CBC reporter Meera Bains will break down the latest numbers from the province. And on the open line, have you seen bad camping behavior this summer? We'll hear from one camper who went to Alouette Lake at Golden Ears Provincial Park for some peace, but got everything but. We'll hear her story, and we're asking you to weigh in on camping etiquette. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Thanks for joining us on CBC Radio 1, CBC Television, and we're live streaming as well. You can also watch us on TikTok Live. You can call us now on the open line. Have you seen bad camping behavior? What are your camping pet peeves? And how can we be good camping neighbors? You can dial us up now. Just hit pound 690 on your cell phone or dial 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can email us bctoday@cbc.ca or leave a comment on TikTok. We'll get to your calls in a couple of minutes. Well, the Minister of Finance has just released the audited financial statements for the fiscal year that's just wrapped up. And CBC reporter Meera Bains is with me now. Hi, Meera.
Hi, Michelle.
Okay, so take us through the deficit is the headline. So take us through that.
That's right. I mean, really what everybody wants to know is basically what's happening right now with the trade war and tariffs and the effect on BC's economy. But we did get a look at last year and how the year wrapped up and the last quarter of the year. And so what position we were in right before Trump was inaugurated on January 20th. So we have to keep that in mind. So this was from last year and the final quarter of the year. And so the deficit was slightly less than what was forecast in the budget, about $500 million less. So we ended up with a deficit of $7.3 billion. It's still a large number. And you know, if we do take a look back at what was happening then, there were some higher revenues from ICBC that was offset by lower natural resource revenue. And the higher revenues came from sort of self-supported crowns like BC Hydro and higher tax results.
Okay, but a hit was taken as well, a fairly large one, from wildfires and emergency response.
Yeah, and that really goes into the expenses. And so the expenses were about $2 billion higher than budgeted. So yes, like you mentioned, the wildfires, climate emergencies, floods, as well as essential service spending like on healthcare and education as well.
Now, as you mentioned, what people want to know is what has happened since January, since the inauguration, and all the talk about tariffs. Did the finance minister, Brenda Bailey, talk about that?
She tried not to. She did provide some hints. She says they're deep in the numbers right now, and that report will come out on September 15th.
Okay.
And that's the one that everybody in BC is waiting for. But she did provide some hints. She did also talk about carbon tax being eliminated and how that's also going to affect the first quarter results that we'll see on September 15th. And as well, you know, in the first quarter, we also started seeing a slowdown in the real estate market.
Right. Yes, of course. The condo market specifically. Yeah.
That's right. And so that means lower revenue from property taxes as well for the government. Right. And so there are things like that and all the after effects of the trade war and tariffs and all these threats that are coming out from U.S. President Donald Trump and that effect on the economy. And that's really what we want to see in that September 15th report, how it's affecting jobs as well.
So overall, Meera, did you get a sense that there was a message around what British Columbians can expect then?
Well, I think we can expect possibly lower revenues from the property transfer tax, lower revenues because of the carbon tax being eliminated, so lower revenues from taxes, and you know, jobs. How jobs were affected in this by this trade war as well. I mean, we already, I think in 2024, the province did outline that BC's unemployment rate for 2024 was 5.6. So it was well below the national average, but we'll see what happens.
So watching for September 15th, for the update on all of that. Then, Meera, thank you very much. We'll see what the reaction is like as well to that lower than predicted projected deficit, but as well the talk around what the impact of the tariffs will be. Thank you.
That's right. And, the $7.3 billion, that's no joke. That's still our deficit, and it's huge.
Exactly. So I imagine there will be a lot of reaction to that still. I know that there's a lot of, this is positive, but it still is more than $7 billion. So that, certainly, that is still a big number. Good to have you. Thanks, Meera. CBC reporter Meera Bains. It is 12:11 now. You're with BC Today. Now, this week, emergency services were interrupted at Delta Hospital for a third time this year. As well, Oliver and 100 Mile District saw temporary ER closures there at their hospitals. And this has been an ongoing issue for years now in BC. We talked about this on the show yesterday, and here are some of your emails. M writes, what is happening in BC schools in terms of health education? Some years ago, a very fine, age-appropriate kindergarten to grade 12 health education program was very well researched by the Ministry of Education with the guidance of physicians, psychologists, educators, and school trustees. It was called Learning for Living, and it featured healthy living, phys ed, mental health, sex education, substance use prevention, and much more excellent age-appropriate health education. As the doctor said, an ounce of prevention saves a pound of cure, and strain on our medical heroes and our healthcare costs. Arthur writes, UBC has 4 medical campuses, Vancouver, Victoria, Prince George, and Kelowna in 2025. There are 300 available seats. There were slightly over 3,000 applicants for those seats. All of those applicants had already gone through and written the MCAT qualification exams. Incredible how the brightest and the smartest people in BC are denied the opportunity to resolve our health care crisis. No capacity. Spring of 2028, we will graduate slightly over 300 doctors, and this very few of those will become family doctors. We also need specialists, psychologists, surgeons, and eye doctors. And Marjorie writes, why can't more municipalities do what Colwood has done? Build a multi-professional healthcare clinic, a one-stop preventative as well as curing facility. Thanks so much for all of your emails. bctoday@cbc.ca. There are, of course, Learn to Camp workshops held by Parks Canada, and you can go to bcparks.ca for more information on responsible camping. Some of that means observe quiet time between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m., use appropriate recycling, garbage, and if these are not accessible, pack out your waste as well, and observe wildlife from a distance. So those are the rules according to BC Parks. We're going to take your calls on this. Have you observed bad camping behavior over this summer or any other time? And what are your own camping pet peeves? Is that subjective? Is the idea of bad camping behavior subjective, as our first caller suggested? And let us know, how can we be good camping neighbors? We'll take your calls coming up after this CBC News Update with Rob Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. The province says the last fiscal year ended better than expected. Finance Minister Brenda Bailey says the deficit of $7.3 billion was $560 million lower than forecast. She says costs were higher for such things as firefighting and emergency response measures, but revenue was also higher. A Surrey cafe owned by a Bollywood star has been shot at again. The business is in the 8400 block of Scott Road. The business is owned by Bollywood actor and comedian Kapil Sharma. There are no reports of any injuries. And the Labor Relations Board has once again denied an attempt by Amazon to prevent workers at its Delta warehouse from unionizing. The e-commerce giant was seeking to overturn an LRB decision earlier this summer that gave the workers the green light to certify. The company was accused of attempting to dilute support for the union by hiring additional workers. And now the forecast on the North Coast, mainly cloudy this afternoon with a high of 18. Highs reaching 23 with some sunshine and a chance of thunderstorms in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 22. Highs getting up to 21 with showers and a risk of severe thunderstorms in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, a high of 23 with showers. You may also see some thunderstorms there. And for Metro Vancouver, Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley. A mix of sun and cloud this afternoon with highs around 19. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Rob, thank you very much. I made a boo-boo on the show yesterday.
You did.
We talked to an ER doctor in St. John, New Brunswick, and I kept saying St. John's, New Brunswick. So, of course, that would be in Newfoundland. Got some very kind corrections by email, so I appreciate hearing from everyone who did write in.
There's a very funny Jim Gaffigan bit about Canadiana, and he talks about St. John and St. John. So if you want a little refresher on that, it's a good one.
I love a good Jim Gaffigan bit.
Yeah.
He does
look it up.
poke fun at Canada quite a bit.
He
I have to
does.
say. And yes, the doctor, I texted him to apologize, and he laughed it off. So there you go. Thank you to everybody who emailed. Yes, we made an error there and called it St. John's. But thank you, Rob. I will look that up. Jim Gaffigan. Very funny guy. That is Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. And yes, thank you so much to everyone who emailed and just kind of gave me that reminder. Very happy to issue that correction today. And we have an email here on camping. John writes, in Kamloops, our family really enjoys camping. I find it challenging to book a campsite and figure out availability. I really appreciate fellow campers who respect the rules of camping and keep relatively quiet, especially in the evening at quiet time. I don't appreciate loud music and talking and noise. Some more comments here, though. Islander writes on TikTok, let people use the wilderness as wilderness. I won't fault them for being messy, but I will fault them for leaving a mess unattended. In public, if you make a mess, you clean it up. And someone also asking, did they clean up after they left? Thank you for your comments on camping. BC Today at cbc.ca, or you can comment on our TikTok Live. Welcome back. You're with BC Today here on CBC. It's 12:35 now, and we are continuing our discussion about camping etiquette. And this is after Christina Owen was on a camping trip with friends at Alouette Lake. And this is a couple of weeks ago. She came across a beachfront with a large camp set up with bags full of garbage and coolers and personal items strewn about. She said loud music throughout the day as well. We're asking you if you've seen camping behavior that you would call inappropriate, and what are your own camping pet peeves, and how can we be good camping neighbors? Our numbers again, you just hit pound 690 on your cell phone, or dial 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can email bctoday@cbc.ca, or just leave a comment on TikTok. Joining me now is Sam Waddington. He's the owner of Waddington Outdoors in Chilliwack, and he's an outdoor enthusiast. We've talked to him a lot on this show. Hi, Sam.
Hello, great to be back with you.
Thanks for joining us. So what do you make of what you've been hearing in terms of this particular situation?
Yeah, so sadly, it's not altogether uncommon. But it always, every time I see a story like this, it breaks my heart because of a number of factors. It's like hard to figure out where to start the conversation on what went wrong here. But it's just, I think it comes down to the fact that there's a time and a place for everything. This is not that place, and it's not that time. And for a series of reasons, it has downstream effects that will ripple well beyond these folks' trip into the backcountry. I think you mentioned earlier in your conversation with Christina, like there's a way to do this just right on the edge of what sounds like this group was up to. But there's also, the factor that there are going to be people who this is their impression of BC parks, right? There's going to be animals who are now affected by this. There's environmental impact. But I think it really comes down to the fact that it's just so easily avoidable. I just hate seeing this type of behavior happen in our beautiful BC park system.
Yeah, it does feel like people have their own stories. I know that, when I've been camping, same thing with a big group. I have a big family. And so we did not play music, but we had a lot of kids. And so these kids got up early in the morning and decided to just run around and have some fun. And a neighbor did say very, very kindly, I can tell that you're good kids, but you're making too much noise and people are still sleeping. And so they did quieten down. So I appreciated that. And at the same time, there was music, loud music coming from another camp nearby, just all through the night. So you kind of see the range there, but it is kind of just about you're living in closer quarters than you might be otherwise, right?
Yeah, and I think what it really comes down to is, people are like, well, this is my camping experience. I'm here,
right.
But that takes out the agency that they had in choosing that location, choosing that weekend, all these types of things. So for me, it starts with like, well, what do you want to do that weekend? No problem if a group wants to party. This was an interesting case in that it was kind of a family. It looked like appeared to be from the video and some of the photos, but or a group of folks, but different ages and some kids involved in things. But whereas most of the time it's young group of guys is the stereotypical thing, or a grad party or something. And I think that while leaving behind garbage and causing like environmental destruction, in my opinion, not okay anywhere, there are places that are going to be away from people where if you want to be louder, you want to have a little bit of of an outsized impact, there are better places to do that. In my opinion, if you go to a BC park, that already immediately kind of hems in what your experience should be all about and what you should be trying to accomplish, right? And whether that's a remote site within a BC park or a very busy campground with neighbors right next to you. I think either way, we need to remember BC parks exist for two reasons, and we often only think about the one. They're a recreation asset, and they are a beautiful place to go camping and enjoy time with your family and friends. But the other side is that they exist to preserve wilderness and preserve habitat. And so when we think about all the critters, and we think about the bears, and we think about all these other impacts, there are factors that need to be considered in that regard, right? Because a problem bear is not just a bear that could potentially harm somebody else. It likely will need to be put down, but that will take resources. That will take conservation officers coming out, and they're absolutely stripped. We do not have enough of them in the province of BC, right? It'll close those campgrounds, maybe for people who have reservations. So there's so many downstream effects to doing the wrong thing in the wrong place, right? I just don't think there's an excuse for leaving that much garbage around and having that high of an impact. It's not the right place for it.
Yeah, Sam Waddington is my guest from Waddington Outdoors. He's based in Chilliwack. He's an outdoors enthusiast. Taking your calls as well. What are your own camping pet peeves, and how can we be good camping neighbors? And Gail is on the line in Kelowna. Hi, Gail.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. What's been your observation?
So this can be very cathartic for me because this has been bugging me for a long while. But, there's a lovely sort of recreation site, forestry campsite up by Hydraulic Lake, which is about 45 minutes to an hour out of Kelowna. And like a lot of designated recreation sites, there's often campgrounds that are, we call them illegals or undesignated, where people, try to avoid the camping fee, maybe get a little more privacy and use a space like this. And there's this beautiful space that I've been hiking to since the late 90s that has an osprey nest there that osprey have been nesting on for decades. And some people partied and camped at this campsite on the May long weekend just when COVID hit, and actually chopped down this huge tree with the nest in it.
Oh, wow.
Destroyed the nest, killed the newly hatched chicks, and the osprey have never been back. And so that was just a heartbreaking thing to happen up there. And there's a local community in Idabel Lake that were pretty devastated as well to lose these birds. Yeah. And then the other thing just generally about these sites that aren't, they're not supervised by camp hosts and things like that. There's always human excrement and toilet paper in the forestry immediately around these campsites that, nobody cleans up. And often a lot of, garbage that's, not burnable in the pits, like cans and stuff. And this one, too, has a lot of, usually over the summer gets a lot of broken glass and things on the beach. And it's just this beautiful, pristine wilderness site with loons nesting nearby. And, nobody comes up, nobody's hired, nobody comes up to clean up after these people. And they just need to, if they're going to enjoy sites like that, look after them, because there's no one policing them, and the people nearby at the recreation site, they have no jurisdiction over these sites because they're outside their purview, so they can get really trashed. And I go up there. I'm actually just heading up there right now to hike my dog.
Yeah.
I and a few other locals have taken it on ourselves to try to clean it up, but it's not a fun task to go in and bury other people's excrement after a long weekend. So it's really sad, because there's all kinds of these beautiful places that people go and use and abuse and just don't take the care that they so richly deserve.
Gail, thank you very much for that. That is a shame, and as well, because it is a non-designated camping area, and it's hard to kind of figure out how to you can't police it or find any kind of recourse, right? What do you make of that, Sam?
Yeah, well, she brings up some interesting points. So, across the board, I would say we've kind of identified in that conversation 3 different types of kind of camping recreation in BC,
Right.
which is like your BC Parks sites, your Rec Sites and Trails BC sites, which are actually now managed by the same ministry. So that's been a helpful move. And that's a recent change. And then there are these backcountry lands areas, which in British Columbia on quote unquote Crown land, you are allowed to recreate and you are allowed to camp. And so those are actually great sites for people to do kind of that louder party if they want to go do that. But what you have as a downstream effect is you also have the type of people who show up to those sites who don't want to be governed. They don't want to play by any rules, and they want to create chaos. Cutting down trees, is,
Wow.
and ruining habitat is not on the table in any section of BC, in my opinion. But I think what it really comes down to is we have the ability to use our voice, I think, as citizens in a jurisdiction that dramatically needs some shifts. British Columbia, and especially areas like weekend adjacent, I'll call them, to the Lower Mainland, we really need to be, and sorry, to the corridor in the Okanagan as well, a higher population base as well. I think we need to voice that opinion, because there are ways that we police this. It's policed by Rec Sites and Trails BC. Ministry of Forests has jurisdiction over this area. But what we've actually seen as an interesting twist is a lot of First Nations communities and bands have taken authority over traditional territories and begun managing some of these backcountry lands areas, and in some cases with incredible success. And I think what it really shows is that if we have a will to just make these places more enjoyable for everybody, there is a way to do that. And there's often a revenue model that supports it, which is the interesting part. These don't necessarily have to be just another taxpayer expense. Most of these sites are fee for service. And in many cases, in these rural sites, the fees charged get pretty close to covering the costs of having a campground host or somebody come around and take some fees and make sure license plates are recorded, et cetera, so that we don't have these downstream effects. So I would just encourage folks to voice their opinions to their MLAs and to the ministers responsible, because I think there is a welcome ear there, and they just need to know that this is a priority for British Columbians.
And you're right that we tend to think of parks as places to recreate, but they are actually they're habitats, and they're all these other things. They are nature and need to be preserved. Andy writes, I've just given up on front country camping now, because there are so many people wanting to party. Anywhere you can get to with a boat or a car can suck. I just back country camp now. Thank you, Andy, for your email. And let's take another call here.
And Andy actually makes a great point too, which is just, if you do want to go that next step, hiking in is a great option, right? You normally get beyond that first group. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That, and again, our first caller said people have these different expectations. You have the folks who kind of like bring their home essentially and park it at the campsite. Steve is our next caller now in Burnaby. Hi, Steve.
Hello, Michelle. How are you?
I am fine. And do you want to share any camping pet peeves, or how we can be good camping neighbors?
Well, this is a real pet peeve. On the long weekend, when these people were fined for having open campfires when they were banned, I think myself that they should have been charged with arson, because the law that we are not allowed to have fires this time of year because the government had put their foot down. And also another thing, if they are caught, they should also be put on probation for the rest of this summer and next summer. And if they're caught again with burning a fire, instead of $1,000 fine, I think it should be at least $5,000. It's got to get into people's heads. This is what goes on every summer now, and it's getting worse and worse. And the people that are out there fighting these fires for us, if they get killed, how would you feel that it was your responsibility that they died because of your stupidity having a silly little fire? It's just ridiculous. I don't understand people anymore. It's like driving and throwing your cigarette out the window in these dry conditions or even in the wet conditions. Keep it in your car. So this thing is with me, higher fines might put, something in their brain to say, hey, I don't want to fork out this money anymore. And if you're on probation and you get charged with arson, and you may not be able to leave Canada to go anywhere else.
Yeah, that's that's taking it another step, isn't it? And you're saying that that's something that is warranted.
Yeah. It's just like I said, $1,000 fine is not enough. It's got to be maybe your first offense, a couple of $1,000, but if you get nailed again, jail time, higher fine.
Yeah. Steve, thank you very much for the call. And yes, there were $30,000 worth of fines over the long weekend for flouting campfire bans. Sam Waddington, let me go to you on that, because when it is found that a wildfire is caused by humans, there are repercussions for that, right? That go beyond just this fine.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And so Steve makes an interesting point, right? It's like, we know what the root cause of a lot of these fires are. And yet the difference between being fined for having a fire outside of a controlled fire time or outside of, the specific protocols around those fires isn't commensurate kind of with the potential outcome. And one of the things that I think, Steve's keying in on here is like, really, how do we communicate this to people? And I think deterrence is part of the formula for sure. And I think it probably needs to be looked at. Inflation and everything, it probably needs to get a little more expensive. Those fines have been in place for a bit, but I do hope that we also can play on the education side, because we know that our backcountry lands are something that, Tourism BC promotes worldwide. We're one of the backcountry destinations on Earth. And when somebody comes from overseas, a stay in a BC Parks campground or in a forestry rec site is top of the list, right? And so if we're promoting these things at that level, we definitely want to make sure that the experience is going to be good. And so there's that piece of it. But what that is challenging is these people may have never been to a backcountry site before. They may have never been to wilderness before. And so the interjection points of, your parents teach you how to camp, or your friends do, or you have a mentor, or even it's taught in classrooms, that may not actually catch a huge part of this cohort of people who are experiencing these places for the first time, and that I would encourage experiencing them for the first time, because wilderness experiences are life-changing experiences. And so I want people to be out there, but I want them to have the tools to do it appropriately and safely, because a lot of these behaviors, people truly do not realize they're doing something bad. Sometimes they do, but oftentimes it feels like wilderness. It feels like you could never have an impact. It's always that, like, we think back to that old school, old growth logging mentality where, it's just this sea of trees in British Columbia as far as the eye can see. And what's another old growth tree until it's the last one. And I think that's sort of where most people are coming to this conversation, is their impact feels so minimal. It really just feels like you can't even make a dent in this huge, vast wilderness. But we all know as core users that at scale, up every forestry road, in every park, on every weekend of spring, summer, fall, has a massive impact. It is scale, and it is a problem. And so I think we need to resource BC parks appropriately. Honestly, I look to the United States. We don't use them as a case example of a lot of things these days, but their national park system is truly something to be heralded. You don't have to go far over the border, for instance, from Metro Vancouver to find the Mount Baker Wilderness area and the national park system there, where there are information parks offices. There are park officers who are at trailheads. There are so many more opportunities to add value, add nuance to the conversation, and educate users before they go into these places. And I think that would solve so many problems. And if you talk to anybody who works in the BC park system, from a campground host through to a senior parks official, they will tell you resourcing is a massive part of the problem. And I just think we are going to love these places to death, and we need to get ahead of that problem.
Yeah, such a good point. Many good points there. And what you said about, people who may not have grown up being, trained by their parents to go camping. I'm one of those people, and grateful to have, the education and resources. And I want to mention that there are Learn to Camp workshops that are held by Parks Canada. I've seen these at libraries, and it's really been heartwarming to see, newcomers come and sit there and learn about proper ways to camp. So education is a big piece for sure. Alicia is our next caller now in Vancouver. Hi, Alicia.
Hi there.
Yes, tell us about your experience, your pet peeves, and how we can be good camping neighbors.
So a few years ago, we were camping at Raleigh with my family, and some people a few sites away had Pepsi and Mentos, and they were doing experiments for their young children, and also balloons. And so they were putting the Pepsi and the Mentos in balloons.
Okay.
And then they were exploding everywhere.
Oh, dear.
And that was during the day, and there was balloon stuff everywhere. And then a bear came that night. And during the day, people had said, like, oh, you shouldn't be doing this. They're like, whatever, it's our site. You guys can't tell us what to do. But then the bear came that night, and then we got it away, and then it came back again. And the rangers up there, the park operators there, still, like, when we go all the time and camp and stuff, they're like, oh, yeah, we remember those people.
Oh, no, the Pepsi and Mentos people. I can imagine the smell of that just being such an attractant, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, like cool science experiment, but maybe not when there are bears around. Alicia, thank you very much. Wow. Okay. That's the first that I've heard of that, for sure. Mike is next now in Wausau. Hi, Mike.
Oh, hello.
Yes. Your thoughts on camping etiquette?
Well, I guess what I've noticed over the last few years, and I've used provincial park campgrounds for many, many, many years, and I've noticed it's just a change in demographics and people that are using the provincial parks since COVID.
Yeah.
So many more people are out camping.
Yeah.
And it just seems like our parks are being loved to death, just like your guest has indicated there. So resourcing is a big issue. And some of our more backcountry, developed campgrounds, I've noticed that the facilities are starting to deteriorate a little bit, and the users are putting so much pressure on them. The demographic change that I see, a couple of things, my pet peeves are dogs and noise, music. And I always go around and try to be, nice and ask people to keep control of their dogs. And of course, since COVID, everybody seems to have a dog now, and they're all in campgrounds.
And they're all camping,
and they're all camping. And just a few weeks ago, I was up at a campground near Wausau, and there were a lot of dogs, and the poor park facility operator had a hard time, and it's an isolated campground. He had a hard time trying to get control of everything, and people were leaving because they were so fed up with all the noise, and I thought that was pretty sad, because we need support for the parks.
You really hit the nail on the head there, Mike, that the explosion in the use of campsites, campgrounds, and the visits there, we've seen that pressure that's being put on these wonderful sites. As you said, Sam, as we're wrapping up here, as you said, we're loving our parks to death here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we really.
Yeah, and so, and Mike, you bring up some really good points. I liken the analogy to something like firearm use, right? People are like, well, I can do my thing and I want to be able to shoot my gun. We all know that happening in the backcountry at scale, highly dangerous for everyone else other than the person who's maybe doing the shooting. And they might be doing target shooting for fun, etc. But we've provided a legitimate alternative, which is firing ranges. And there are good and safe ways to do that activity. And I think one of the things we're coming into here is we don't actually have these good activity locations for a lot of urban dwellers who maybe live in a small apartment. Maybe they don't have a yard where they can blow off a Pepsi in a balloon and do those experiments with their kids. Again, I think well-intentioned sometimes, or where they can just let their dog run free, quote unquote, right? We haven't provided enough of those legitimate ways to do that. And so the backcountry has become the catch-all for all of our wildest activities that society needs to get out of our system. And it's we're going to have to find some solutions for sure.
Yeah, education and resources, as you say. Sam, great to have you here as our resource. Thanks so much for your time.
As always, great to be with you.
Sam Waddington from Mount Waddington Outdoors.